Bead-Spitter by Michael Renville. Read by Frank Blissett. There was a boy beloved whose spittle was all kinds of beautiful beads. So abundant were they that his people arrayed themselves therewith. As the fame of this spread abroad, the young women of surrounding tribes were all anxious to have him for a husband. And as a certain maiden was going to make him her husband, if possible, she heard behind her someone laughing. She stopped, when lo, two women came up and said, "Why, here stands Hert-Killer." And they added, "Come along, Hert-Killer. We are going to make the Bead-Spitter our husband. Let us go together." So she went with them. These two young women were called the Two Women. They did not grow from the people, but grew wildly and were supernatural beings, hence their name, the Two Women. So Hert-Killer went with them and lay down with them, as it was now night. But before they went to sleep, the two women said, "Look here, Hert-Killer, when the morning comes, at whosoever head stands the birch-bark dish with quill-work around it and filled with rice, she is the one who shall have Bead-Spitter for a husband." So when the morning came, it was standing at the head of Hert-Killer, they say. Then they went on and came to a large lake, whose farther shores could not be seen. Out on the water was a large canoe, and as this was where Bead-Spitter's village was, they called and said, "We have come to get Bead-Spitter for our husband." Someone came rowing. When he arrived, they said, "We have come to make Bead-Spitter our husband." To which he replied, "I do not know anyone by that name." But at the same time he filled his mouth with beads and then spat them out. The beads were scattered all around, and, laughing, they gathered them up. Then the two women went into the canoe, but the other they drove back and said, "Go away, Hert-Killer." So they went home with the man, but he was not Bead-Spitter. Hert-Killer stood there crying, when, lo, another canoe came in sight. It was a very bright and beautiful one, for it was all metal. It came on and arrived. This was the Bead-Spitter, and, as he wore very bright clothing, the appearance was very splendid. "Young woman, what are you crying for here?" he said. So she told him she had come to get Bead-Spitter for a husband, and what the two women had done to her. Then he said, "Come on, we two will go home." So she went home with him. Let us return to the others. The two women went home with the man whom they had met. His name was Teal-Duck, and he lived with his grandmother. By and by someone said, "Teal-Duck, Bead-Spitter calls you to a feast." And Teal said, "Indeed, somebody has said something." And then to the woman he said, "Do not come, they are making mystery. No woman looks at it." So he went, but the woman said, "We too are accustomed to see the supernatural. We will go." And so they went. When they reached the place, there was much noise, and they came and looked in by a hole of the tent, and lo, the inmates were dancing on the back of Teal-Duck. He saw his wives peeping in, and jumping up, said, "I also will join the dance on the teal's back." And so he jumped about. They say this was the duck that is called the teal, and hence, to this day, that duck has no fat on its back, because the people danced on it, they say. Then the two women started back, and, taking 2 blankets, they put bees in one and ants in the other, and went on. The other woman, who was called Hert-Killer, was with the boy beloved. Her they took and thrust out, and then placed themselves on either side of him. Then Teal-Duck came home, and when he had lifted 1 blanket, the bees came out and stung him. When he lifted the other, the ants came out and bit him. Then he said, "Indeed, here is much that is strange." And so he opened out the blankets, and the ants and bees swarmed out and drove everybody from the house. So he went and found the 2 wives of Teal-Duck with Bead-Spitter, to whom he said, "My elder brother, give me back the younger one." There was no reply. Again he made the demand, but no answer came. And so Teal-Duck went home singing this song, they say. "You spitter of pearls, give me back my younger wife, for over the lake I always drive box-elder pegs." And from this has come down to us this form of speech. When sores come out on people and pus is formed, they say, "Teal-Duck has shot them." Now when night came on, Sharp-Grass took his knife, and finding the boy beloved sleeping with the 2 women, he cut off his head, and, holding it in his hand, took his station inside of the tent. When the people knew that the boy beloved lay headless, there was a great tumult. So they went to the house of the teal, but his grandmother had placed him on the top of his tent. They went in, but only a little brown heron came flying out. Hence the fowl that is called little brown heron, snipe, is the grandmother of the Teal-Duck. It flew away and alighted in the corner of a reed marsh. Then the people went and trod down and trampled up thoroughly the reed island. Hence, when all the roots of the reeds are red, they say this is the blood of Teal's grandmother. Then Teal-Duck, having the head of the boy beloved, went and stood within the tent of the chief. And the mother of boy beloved cried and said, "You bad, worthless fellow who debauched my child and had people dance upon your own back, you have impoverished me." While she cried, someone said, "Indeed, and was it I who did this thing?" Then they called Iktomi, and when his mother said, crying, "Who is it who says this aloud? Indeed, and was it I who did it?" Then Iktomi said, "Now consider this. You say Iktomi is a fool. Why, don't you understand this? It is he who stands within the tent who says this." Then they tore down the tent, and beheld Teal-Duck holding the head of boy beloved, and the other having the knife, and they stood up high. "Come down," they said, "you shall live." But up they went and stood in the moon. And so now, when the moon is full, what appears in it is Teal-Duck holding the head of one who spits out pearls, and the other is Sharpgrass holding the knife in his hands. That was Bead-Spitter by Michael Renville. Read by Frank Blissett.